LISP or Locator ID Separation Protocol. In this video, I'm going to talk about the concept of the LISP. In the second video, in the next video, I will configure this scenario and you will learn the configuration. But here, I'm going to talk about the concept of the LISP, how LISP is working. Don't worry about the detail. Here, I'm going to talk about the function of the LISP, the features of the LISP, for example, how LISP is working, the LISP component, mapping server, mapping resolver, ingress tunnel router or egress tunnel routers. Don't worry about the detail. I will show you the many configuration detail in the next video after this video. Look at here. In this scenario, as you can see, we have 4 routers. The first router is the, for example, router 1. Let me to show you the host name. This is the router 1. Okay, the router 1 is our MS or MR. I will talk about the MS and MR. Also, we have XTR1. XTR1 is the router 2, and also we have router 3, and finally we have router 4. Okay, I will talk about the XTR, MS, MR. Now we have 4 routers, R1, R2, R3, and R4. Okay, and as you can see here, R2 connected to a LAN, R3 connected to another LAN, and R4 also connected to another LAN. Okay, this is our simple scenario. You know that when you are configuring, for example, a routing protocol in IP network, in IP, for example, TCP IP network, you should enable some of the routing protocols, OSPF, EIGRP, or other routing protocols to advertise the information about the subnets between the routers. For example, assume that I'm going to configure OSPF. If you want to configure OSPF in one area, for example, you should enable OSPF on all interfaces to advertise the subnets, to establishing the OSPF neighborships, and after that advertising the subnets, and finally calculating the best path with SPF process and doing and using that best path in the routing table. Okay, you know that this is the configuration of the OSPF or EIGRP. If you need to use EIGRP, you should configure EIGRP in all interfaces or some other protocols. Okay, this is normal IP routing. In this scenario, I am going to show you how LISP is working, the difference between the LISP and, for example, a normal routing in the IP space. Okay, look at here. In this method of routing, in the LISP Locator ID Separation Protocol, we have 2 space. You know that in IP routing, if this is IP routing, we have 1 space, the IP space. In IP space, we should enable OSPF or EIGRP on all of the interfaces. Okay, but if you want to use LISP, we have 2 space of addressing. The first space is RLOC space, and the second space is EID space. Let me to talk about the RLOC and also EID. What is the RLOC? First, we should know the RLOC is abbreviation of the routing locator. Look at here. RLOC means routing locator. And we have 1 space of routing, we call it RLOC space. In RLOC space, for example, in this example, we have R1, R2, R3, and R4, and I'm going to enable, for example, OSPF in this space, enabling OSPF on R1's interface and also R2's interface in this part, and R3 and R4. Okay, but as you can see here, we have another space that in this space, I'm not going to, for example, enable OSPF. Only we should enable OSPF in the RLOC space in the first part. Okay. As a result, we have connectivity between R1, R2, R3, and R4. Assume that I configured a loopback interface on R1, on R2, on R3, and R4. And now we have connectivity between R1's loopbacks, R2's loopbacks, R3's loopbacks, and also R4 loopbacks. Why? Because we enabled one routing protocols. For example, OSPF. Maybe you want to enable EIGRP. It's okay. Maybe you need to configure ISIS. It's okay. It's not important which method of routing. Maybe you want to configure, for example, static routing. Again, it's okay. But we have finally connectivity between the networks in this our look space. Let me to show you how we can use it. I'm going to configure a static route because it's so easy to configure a static route. Look at here. This is an hub and spoke scenario, okay? R1 is the hub, and R2, R3, and R4 is our spokes. It's easier to configure with the static routes. Let me to show you the configuration, but don't forget this scenario's goal is for learning the LISP process, not the configuration. Because of that, don't worry about the detail of the configuration. Let me first configure R1's interfaces, and after that R2, R3, and R4. Okay, starting from the R1, R1 has three interface fast Ethernet 00. The IP address of this interface is 10.121.255.255.255.0. Don't forget, in this scenario, I'm going to use this method of addressing 10.x.y0/24. And X is the ID of one router, Y is the ID of another router. Because of that, this link's range is 10.120/24. And the interface of router 2 is 10.122, and the interface of router 1 is 10.121. Okay, let me to continue the, for example, configuration. I enabled interface fast Ethernet 00 on R1. Now, we should configure the fast Ethernet 01. The IP address of this interface is 10.131.255.255.255.0. No shutdown. And then interface fast Ethernet 10 has this IP address. IP address 10.141.255.255.255.0 and no shutdown. Now I configured the R1's interfaces with this range of IP addresses. Do show IP interface brief. Look at here. We have three IP addresses on the interfaces of the R1. And also we need one loopback interface loopback 0. The IP address of the loopback is quad 1, quad 2, 5, 5. That's it. This is the configuration, initial configuration of the R1. Show IP interface brief. Now show us the loopback interface. Let's go to the router 2. This is the router 2. Conft interface fast Ethernet 00. The IP address is 10.122.255.255.255.0 with no shutdown. And also we have interface loopback 0 with the IP address of the quad 2, quad 2, 5, 5. That's it. Let me to show you, do show IP interface brief. We have two interface fast Ethernet 00 and also loopback 0. And again, in the router 3, let me configure the router 3 interface fast Ethernet 00. The IP address is 10.133.255.255.255.0. No shutdown. Interface loopback 0. IP address is the quad 3, quad 2, 5, 5. That's it. This is the configuration of the router 3. Do show IP interface brief. That's it. And also we have router 4. This is the router 4. Conft interface fast Ethernet 00. IP address is 10.144. Okay. 255.255.255.0. No shutdown. Interface loopback 0 has this IP address. IP address quad 4, quad 255. This is the initial configuration in the router 4. Do show IP interface brief. Very good. Now we need to configure connectivity between these routers. For example, because R2, R3, and R4 are spoke routers, we can configure only one default route in the router 2, router 3, or router 4. Or if you want, you can configure, for example, some method of routing. Let me to configure a static routing, but I'm not going to use a static routes. It's better to use the, for example, I'm not going to use the default route. It's better to use normal static routes. For example, In the process of Lisp, we need only connectivity between the loopback interfaces. Because of that, for example, finally we should